Have you guys noticed? Oda Sensei has really been putting a spotlight lately on just how inhumane the celestial dragons are toward innocent people. The clearest example is what Garling did. The way he talked to the woman who had just given birth to his child, saying, "I've already ordered a wife that's with me." That's not just arrogance, that's psychopathic. But I think what Oda Sensei really wants us to see here is that, for the celestial dragons, normal humans on the surface are nothing more than that. Before this flashback started, the image we all had of the Rocksteady Zebek was that he was nothing but a brutal, but when you look at the actual story that leads up to the God Valley incident, the expression starts to change. And that's classic One Piece. If you look at Luffy from the perspective of the wider world in One Piece, he is seen as this terrifying, dangerous pirate. But when we as the readers actually see what really happened in each case, the context, the details, it's completely different story. And because we are basically following the narrative through Luffy's eyes, it's easy for us to connect with him and sympathize. Honestly, that might not even be unique to One Piece, it's something you can find in the stories in general. But that's a discussion for another time. Every Monday, right after the official One Piece chapter comes out, I post a breakdown here on this channel, LunaPienArt, giving my take on the latest chapter from the perspective of someone reading it in Japanese. But honestly, there's always more to talk about than I can fit into just one video, so that's why I decided to make this extra one. For my Patreon members, I also share articles with deeper explanation that really dig into the finer details of this Japanese wording, so definitely check it out. By the way, I've been getting comments from viewers saying they've just started reading One Piece in Japanese. No, learning Japanese is definitely a tough journey, but I've actually got another channel where I post videos to help people take those first steps. If that sounds like something you'd like, feel free to check it out. In Japan, there are tons of anime events and fan communities, and if you are into manga and anime, especially One Piece, being able to understand Japanese can really open up a lot of opportunities. And lately, I've noticed there are more and more content out there using ChatGPT to generate translation, but when you study the Japanese language yourself, you'll be able to pick up on the subtle differences and even spot when something feels off. So if you're curious, take a look at the link in the description and watch that video too. First, I want to point out Rock's words here. 何か大きな運命みたいなもんに手繰り寄せられている気分だ。It feels like I'm being pulled in by some kind of great destiny. Looking at what really happened at God Valley, how so many marines and pirates who would later become hugely important all gathered there. It's clear that the title, Unmei no Shima, the Island of Destiny, is spot on. And without a doubt, this moment here is where that idea of destiny really comes to life. In this scene, Shanks and Shamrock's mother is begging Dragon not to hand the children over to Garling. And if Shanks was truly taken out of Garling's hand by Dragon at that moment, then the fact that Shanks later ends up helping Dragon's son, Luffy, that's nothing short of destiny. On the other hand, I think Rock tried to get his own child, Teach, out of God Valley, knowing full well that he himself was going to die there. But how exactly did it all play out? Here's the sequence I imagine. First, I think Whitebeard's line, "That fool Rocks always loses sight of his goals," really hit the mark. In other words, instead of focusing on main mission of the Rocks pirates, rescuing Shakuyaku, Rocks broke away on his own to search for his wife and Teach. And along the way, he was blocked by Garp and Roger. That's probably when the exchange went like this. "Wait, Rocks. Out of my way, Roger." After that, Rocks is defeated by Garp and Roger, but even in his beaten state, he somehow managed to muster the last of his strength to try to protect his child, Teach, and Teach's mother. That's when Garling shows up, already having captured Teach and his mother, and uses them as hostages to finish Rocks off. Seeing this scene must have been what shocked Dragon to his core, pushing him to quit the Marines and start a revolutionary movement. Remember, Dragon once said, "子は親の弱点だ." Children are a parent's weakness. I think those words only carry that kind of weight because Dragon actually witnessed Rocks being killed after his bond with his child was exploited. What makes this even more interesting is the chapter title, Unmei no Shima, the Island of Destiny. And that phrase isn't new, it was actually used before, in another arc, the Island of Destiny Minion. Do you remember what happened there? That's where the Marine Corazon hits low inside in the treasure chest to save him. Which then makes you wonder, at God Valley, another Island of Destiny, could it be that Dragon, who was also Marine at that time, did the same thing by hiding Shanks in the treasure chest? The parallel is right there. Now, when Sengoku was talking to Law about what happened in Minion Island, he said this. 4 things disappear in that instant. The Barrels Pirates, the lives of my men, the Ope Ope no Mi, and the boy with Amberley disease. If you look at that list, it almost lines up with the God Valley instant too. The Barrels Pirate would correspond to the Rocks Pirate. The Ope Ope no Mi could match up with the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi or maybe even the Uo Uo no Mi Azure Dragon model. The boy with Amberley disease would correspond to Shanks. That just leaves the lives of my men. And maybe we haven't seen the counterpart for that yet. It could mean that Summer on the world government side died at God Valley. In one of my earlier videos, I suggested that maybe even one of the 5 elders could have died there. Or it could simply line up with Dragon. After this incident, he likely quit the Marines and became known as the Rebellious Dragon. If that's the case, then that really becomes important is what happens next. Whether Dragon is still alive or if his fate is already sealed. Like Corazon. Now I mentioned that Shanks seems to correspond to the boy with Amberley disease. Law. And here's something interesting. Both Law and Shanks were hidden in treasure chests and survived, and there's actually a common thread between them. Their shared hobby of holo, wandering. This holo, wandering, means in Japanese living without a fixed form, drifting from place to place without a set destination. Shanks grew up wanting to see more of the world. And Law himself spoke about wanting to learn more about the mysterious fate of the D. It makes you wonder. Maybe those who were saved inside treasure chests all end up with same drive, that hunger to learn more about the world. And if that's the case, look at Teach. His hobby is studying history. He's clearly fascinated by the world too, so maybe that means he was also hidden in the treasure chest and escaped God Valley that way. Or there's another possibility. We know that Kuma, with the power of the Nikyu Nikyu no Mi, Nikyu Nikyu fruit, managed to help 500 people escape from God Valley. It's not impossible that Teach was among them. Either way, it seems that Teach did in fact escape from God Valley, just as Rocks had hoped. Before this flashback started, the general image everyone had of Rocks was that he was an extremely violent pirate. But when you actually look at how the flashback plays out, he doesn't come across as quite that savage. Yeah, it's true he challenged other pirates in Davy Back fight and defeated a lot of them, but that's still pirate against pirate. Nothing that caused suffering to innocent civilians. There's also scenes showing the Rocks pirates attacking an island called Foot Colony. But when you look closer, that place was running so-called international charity work that was basically a scam. The monks there were collecting money under the pretense of helping poor children, but in reality they were pocketing it for themselves. It's also said Rocks burned down 14 ports, destroyed 5 towns, and brought down a nation. But if you think about it, those could have been places connected to the world government, or corrupt operations like Foot Colony. In that sense, what he did might not have been simple cruelty. It may have been targeted at people and systems that were already rotten. This time, we finally learned the real reason Rocks went to God Valley. And it wasn't just because he wanted treasure or because he wanted to claim Shakuyaku for himself. It was much simpler. He just wanted to protect his wife and child. Of course, as the Rocks Pirates, the official reason on the surface was to take Shakuyaku back, and sure, Rocks has often been painted with the image of being reckless with women, fathering children everywhere. But from what we've actually seen, it looks like he genuinely cared about his wife and about Teach, his son. Even when he showed up at Shakuyaku's bar, he seemed totally distracted. His mind clearly fixed on Teach and his mother. So in a way, you could say Rocks was surprisingly a devoted father. And that also explains why, whenever those two were in danger, his weakness showed through. That's why I think Oda Sensei isn't trying to draw Rocks as a pure villain. Yeah, he's brutal as a pirate, but he's not portrayed as someone who is rotten to the core. And this actually connects with something we saw in Oden's flashback. Remember, Oden spent time sailing with Roger's crew. At one point, he went into town to get ingredients for Oden, actual Oden, and some of Roger's crew, but in anime, Shanks told him, "If you mess with regular civilians, the captain's gonna get mad." That tells us Roger's crew didn't attack ordinary people either. They only fought other pirates, stole treasure, and got violent in that world. So really, just like I mentioned in the previous video, this reflects the prototype idea of peace main pirates that Oda Sensei early on. Pirates who don't target innocent people, but instead go after other pirates. When you think about it that way, it's not Roger or even Rocks who were causing real harm to innocent people. It was celestial dragons. Just look at Garling. He stabbed that red-haired mother who had been bravely raising two kids, Shanks and Shamrock, and waiting for him, Garling, without even a moment of hesitation. And the celestial dragons as a whole were treating the people of God Valley like pieces of their twisted game, killing for their own amusement. That's where the real cruelty is. So the Rocks that people imagined back then was probably nothing like the truth. The image of him as a savage pirate was most likely shaped by how the world government and the Marines wanted the world to see him. In fact, it's the same thing we are seeing with Luffy now. To the outside world, Luffy is being portrayed as some massive monkey-like monster. And the news is spreading that he killed Vegapunk, the world's greatest scientist, when the reality is he was fighting to protect Vegapunk from the world government. The truth and the public story are completely opposite. And that's really the same with God Valley. Back then, the story we all heard was that Rocks was the monstrous pirate, and it took both Roger and Garp teaming up just to bring him down. But looking at it now, the picture feels different. What might have actually happened is that Rocks was desperately trying to protect his wife and child, and it was Roger and Garp who stood in his way. So it's said that Garp himself admitted he didn't want to talk about what happened at God Valley. Sengoku explained it by saying it was because Garp had teamed up with Roger, a pirate. But honestly, I don't think that's the real reason. I think the truth is that the Garp couldn't talk about it because he knew he wasn't the one who truly finished off the Rocks. On top of that, he realized Rocks had actually died protecting his wife and child. That's the part Garp probably couldn't bring himself to say out loud. Of course, it's true that Garp and Roger fought together to stop Rocks, but when Rocks was already weakened, it was Garling who delivered the final blow using Rock's wife and Teach as hostages. Now, Garling today is introduced as the champion who shined at God Valley, and I think there are two reasons for that title. One, he probably won the tournament held there, and two, among the Celestial Dragons, The belief is that it was Garling who killed Rocks. The general public, though, has no idea about the God's Knights. What they know is that the highest authority under the world government is the Marine Admirals. Sure, we don't know exactly how Admirals compare in strength to the God Knights, but Garling must at least be on the par with Admiral. Even so, the only names the world knows are the Admirals, not the God Knights. So to ordinary people, the story became that Garp stopped the Rocks at God Valley. And maybe the world government even paid Morgans to spread that version of the story through the news. Up until now, we've seen plenty of examples showing that the Celestial Dragon have zero compassion for ordinary humans. But Garling takes it to an entirely different level. He even stabbed the very woman who had just given birth to his own child without a second thought. That's pure psychopath behavior. And I think at some point, Garling realized that Rocks had come to God Valley for one reason, to protect his family. He then twisted that love a parent has for their child and used it against Rocks to kill him. This brings to mind Somer's theory of love. Remember his words? Love is the passion to embrace even the thorns that comes closer. A parent holds their child, thorns and all. And the child in turn screams in tears as they witness the death of their parents they least want to lose. There's beauty in killing. 殺しには愛がある. That line could very well be drawing on the events of God Valley. Maybe it was even foreshadowing what happened with Rocks desperately trying to protect Peach. I think Oda Sensei intentionally had Somer say those lines back in Elbaf arc, just so that later on the tragedy of God Valley would echo those very words. And I already mentioned earlier in this video how, for Celestial Dragons, killing people who lived on the surface is nothing more than drama. It's just entertainment for them. Think about it. In Elbaf, their mission didn't need to be game at all. If they wanted those kids, they could have just snatched them out quickly. But instead, they deliberately turned it into a game. And Shamrock ordered it. Why? Well, as we saw from Somer's reaction, it's because they wanted to create a kind of drama. A spectacle of adults desperately trying to save children from being kidnapped. That's the entertainment value for the Celestial Dragons. The same thing happened at God Valley. They told the slaves, if you can survive for those weeks, you'll be fine. Again, they gave the people hope, not because they actually intended to free them, but because it created a real-life human drama. Even Ivankov put their mindset into words. People run because they have hope. What's the fun in killing someone who's already given up in despair? That's why the Celestial Dragon don't just kidnap or kill outright. They set things up as games so they can enjoy watching all the emotions that come out of people caught in tragedy. And when you think about it, the TV dramas we watched today are a safe, harmless version of that same concept. In our world, things like murder or slavery are crimes in almost every country, but in the form of TV dramas, they can be acted out on stage or screen without real consequences. But in the world of One Piece, there's no such things as TV dramas, so the Celestial Dragons create a real human theaters of tragedy, and they consume that suffering as their entertainment. Yeah, as you can see, Oda Sensei has clearly been making a point of showing how cruel the world government is toward innocent people, and that's become especially clear ever since the Ghost Knights appeared in the Elbaf arc. Sultan's treatment of Kuma's family on Egghead, Sumer's words in Elbaf, and now the truth behind the God Valley incident. All of it paints a picture of what world government has really done to people. And that means going forward, in the God Valley flashback, readers are probably going to start feeling sympathy for Roxy Zebek, maybe even emotionally connecting with him. And when that happens, some readers might even start rooting for Blackbeard's pirates since they are carrying on Rock's will. So in the massive battle ahead, I think not just the Straw Hat crew, but also the Blackbeard pirates are going to play a very important role. I already talked about this in detail over on Dawn Dusk channel, so if you check that out, I'd really appreciate it. Rocks may have been brought down by celestial dragons, especially Garling, but I believe the one who's going to carry out his lingering grudge against them is Blackbeard. That's the direction I think the story is heading. For more on that, check out this video. Finally, I want to share a question I got from one of my Patreon members about the Davy Clan. Miguel asked, I didn't fully understand if the descendants of the Davy Clan all live in God Valley, if most of the island's inhabitants were Davy, or if some people originally from God Valley left and spread the D name around the world. Or is Zebek's family the only one that's considered descendants of the Davy Clan? Now, there hasn't been any really detailed explanation on this, so it's hard to say for sure, but I think it's likely that most of Davy Clan lived on God Valley. That would explain why Rox told his wife and Teach to rely on the Davy Clan. There are probably some who, like Rox, left the islands, but I think it's safe to assume the mystery stayed on the God Valley. But I think it's safe to assume the majority stayed on God Valley. Personally, I believe there were 12 members of the Davy Clan, including Teach. Here's why. In chapter 1096, the Celestial Dragon announcer says there were 13 super rare rabbits. One of those 13 was clearly Kuma, the surviving buccaneer brought from Marijoa. So that leaves 12 others, and I think those 12 were the Davy Clan living in God Valley at that time. That said, it was also mentioned that some of them survived and are still active in the underworld today. So it makes sense to think that, while most of Davy Clan stayed in God Valley, some left, connected themselves with the darker side of the world, and survived through those underground networks. And, as with any clan, over generations, their numbers would naturally spread and grow. So overall, I'd say, most of the Davy Clan lived on God Valley, but a portion of them branched out into the underground and kept the bloodline alive that way. So that wraps up the parts of the latest chapter that I didn't get to cover earlier. I've been breaking it down from the perspective of reading the Japanese version of One Piece. There's still so much more I want to talk about, so I'll be posting more detailed Japanese explanation and extra thoughts on my page, so definitely check it out. I'll also be updating videos regularly over on Dawn Dusk channel, so don't miss those either. And one more thing, I also offer private Japanese lessons as well as translation and marketing work in Japanese. If you're interested in working in Japan or work for Japanese people, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or email. Alright, see you in the next video.